Last month, a Russian advisor to Putin stood in front of the world and accused the United States of plotting to use cryptocurrency to wipe out its entire debt, $37 trillion. And here's the thing, he's not making it up. Trump just created a strategic Bitcoin reserve. His Treasury Secretary started meetings with stablecoin executives. A crypto billionaire presented a plan to acquire 5 million Bitcoin to the White House. And so I ran the numbers, and what I found is the math for this crypto debt reset is completely impossible. So, what actually is happening? Well, the answer to that will decide whether your savings survive the next decade. In this video, I'll show you the 3 debt reset scenarios that have been discussed in Washington, why each one fails mathematically, and what they are really doing instead, because the real plan isn't on Twitter. It's in the US Treasury markets. Now, when this story broke, I noticed people split into 2 general camps. The first camp says Bitcoin's going to $10 million per coin and America becomes debt-free. No problem. The second camp says it's complete conspiracy theory nonsense. Russia is just spreading, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Classic case of FUD. Nothing to see here. But I fear both camps are missing what's actually happening, because after building a spreadsheet and running every calculation that I could, I realized that the math doesn't just fail. It reveals something that they are not saying out loud. Because while everyone's focused on Bitcoin prices and XRP speculation, there's a completely different mechanism that's already running in the background. It's happening in boring parts of the financial system that no one is watching. But it's real, and it started before Russia even made that statement. So let's discuss the scenarios the internet has been buzzing about, because before we can understand what's actually happening here, we need to see why the obvious answers don't work. Now, the United States government currently holds approximately 198,000 Bitcoin. At today's price of around $100,000 per Bitcoin, give or take a few 10,000, that's roughly $20 billion. The crypto billionaire Michael Saylor's pitch to the White House is simple. Acquire millions of Bitcoin over time, hold it as a strategic reserve asset, like gold, and watch the price appreciate. He's projecting that Bitcoin could hit about $10 million per coin by 2045. Now, the theory is that as Bitcoin rises, the US could eventually sell portions to pay down the national debt without raising the taxes or, cutting spending. Debt problem is solved. And I'll be honest, when I first saw this, I thought to myself, okay, well, that's actually interesting. And so I did the calculations. Now, current US national debt, like we said, is about $37 trillion. Current US Bitcoin holdings is approximately 200,000 coins. So, if you wanted to completely cover the debt with Bitcoin, what will the price need to be? Divide 37 trillion by 200,000 Bitcoin and you get $185 million per coin. Now, that sounds absolutely insane, but let's keep going. If Bitcoin reached 185 million per coin, and there can only be a maximum of 21 million total Bitcoin in existence, well, that will create a total market capitalization of about 3.9 quadrillion US dollars. Let me show you what that means. All the wealth on the planet Earth, every stock, every bond, every piece of real estate, every dollar in every bank account, every bar of gold, whatever you want to call it, totals approximately 450 trillion. Bitcoin, to cover US debt alone, would need to be worth about 3.9 quadrillion dollars. That's almost 9 times more than all the wealth on Earth combined. If you say 5 million Bitcoin, well, then, and that's almost a quarter of all Bitcoin that will ever be, made, you still need almost, like $7.5 million per coin. The problem doesn't go away with more Bitcoin, because here's the paradox. If Bitcoin actually reached $185 million per coin, if it became worth more than all global wealth combined, what do you think that means? It basically means that the US dollar is worthless, because the only way Bitcoin becomes that much is if people are fleeing dollars at such a massive scale that the currency has totally collapsed. But let's not forget that the $37 trillion debt is denominated in dollars. Now, if the dollar is worthless, then the $37 trillion debt also becomes worthless, which means that you just destroyed your currency to save your currency. It's like burning down your house to collect the insurance money while you're still inside the house. So Bitcoin at $185 million per coin, it solves the debt, but it also destroys the dollar, which tells me that this can't be the real plan. The US government isn't stupid. They can't, they will have done this math also. So if it's not Bitcoin, and then what is it? And that's when I started seeing the XRP theories. Now, the second scenario involves XRP and Ripple. Ripple is a US-based company that created XRP to facilitate international payments. They currently control about 40 billion XRP tokens. XRP is currently about $3 per token. So the theory goes that what if the US government made a deal with Ripple? What if Ripple donated or was persuaded to hand over their 40 billion XRP tokens to help pay down the debt? Now, some versions of this theory get really specific. They say that XRP will be revalued to exactly $875 per token, which will make those 40 billion tokens worth 35 trillion, almost the entire debt. So let's run those numbers. 40 billion XRP times $875 equals 35 trillion. The math checks out. The total XRP market cap at that price is about 87.5 trillion. The entire cryptocurrency market right now, Bitcoin, Ethereum, everything combined, is worth about 2.5 trillion. XRP would need to be 35 times larger than the current entire crypto market. It will be larger than all US stocks combined, larger than all global bonds, larger than the GDP of the United States and China combined. But okay, let's say somehow XRP actually reached that price. Market forces, adoption, international payment systems, for the sake of argument, let's just say it happened. Guys, this isn't Age of Empires where you click a button and convert someone's assets. This is a private US company that has millions to spend on lawyers. Do you think they're just going to hand over 37 trillion worth of assets to the US government? Even during wartime, the government must compensate property seizures. The constitutional and political backlash will be catastrophic. But let's just say somehow the US government forced the issue. Eminent domain, national security emergency, some legal mechanism that we're not seeing. Here's what happens next. Every other crypto project immediately flees the US jurisdiction. You'd kill the golden goose for one egg, destroying US leadership in the exact industry that's supposed to save you. And honestly, if XRP can reach $875, the dollar has probably already collapsed, which means that the debt is already meaningless. The XRP scenario has the same problem as Bitcoin. The math technically works, but the second order effects destroy the whole thing that you're trying to save. It's the same paradox, but using a different asset. But what about gold? The United States holds just over 8,000 tons of gold. Now, at current prices around £3,950 per ounce, give or take, that's worth approximately just over 1 trillion. So that's about 2.8% of the US debt. Now, to cover the full debt, gold would need to hit about $141,492 per ounce. That's about 36 times higher than today's price. Here's the problem. About 50% of all gold ever mined is in private hands, jewelry, coins, private vaults. If the US revalues its gold to just over £140,000 per ounce, every person with a gold necklace becomes wealthy overnight. You've basically created massive inflation, which destroys the dollar, which kind of makes the debt meaningless anyway. So again, it's the same paradox, but different assets. We've talked about 3 scenarios, all mathematically impossible without destroying the dollar in the process, which means that these cannot be the real plans. But then I noticed something interesting. You remember those meetings I mentioned at the beginning? The Treasury Secretary Besant meeting with stablecoin executives? Well, in July 2025, Congress passed the Genius Act. It's a stablecoin legislation that passed with bipartisan support. The law now blesses dollar backed stablecoins. It creates a regulatory framework for companies like Tether and Circle to issue digital tokens that are pegged one to one to the US dollar. And here's the key part: these stablecoins must be backed by US Treasury bonds, cash, or other ultra safe US assets. Well, at first I thought, well, that's just them cleaning up the crypto industry, making it safer for consumers. And then I looked at the numbers. Tether has $157 billion in circulation. Circle has about 61 billion. Together, that's over 200 billion in stablecoins that are backed by US Treasury bonds. Tether alone holds approximately 127 billion in US Treasuries. That's more government debt than Germany. That's more than South Korea, more than Saudi Arabia. Tether, a private crypto company, is the 19th largest holder of US debt globally. And the US government just passed a law to expand this spread of stablecoins. Then I started looking at where people are actually using these stablecoins. For example, Argentina, about 62% of all crypto transactions are stablecoins. People are using USDT stablecoins to protect their savings from 143% inflation. In Nigeria, about 12% of the population uses stablecoins. Turkey leads the world in stablecoin trading volume relative to GDP. In Lebanon, where the local currency collapsed, people are getting paid in stablecoins and using it to buy groceries. About 170 to 230 million people around the world are using dollar-backed stablecoins. And that's when it clicked. While everyone watches Bitcoin prices or are debating XRP can reach, $875, something completely different is happening. When someone in Argentina, buys $100 of stable coins to protect their savings, Tether takes that $100 and buys US Treasury bonds. When someone in Nigeria receives payments in stable coins, Circle takes those dollars and buys US Treasury bonds. You have almost 200 million people who couldn't access US banking and now holding digital dollars. And every single one of those digital dollars will create demand for US Treasury bonds. And then it clicked. This isn't a debt elimination plan. This is a debt distribution plan. Stablecoins aren't replacing the dollar. They're basically exporting the dollar to 200 million people who couldn't get it before. And so while everyone is arguing about whether Bitcoin can pay off the US debt, the US government is quietly helping itself to build a system where hundreds of millions of people in emerging markets become indirect holders of US debt through stablecoins. And the more unstable their local, currencies become, the more they will want stablecoins. The more they want stablecoins, the more demand there is for US Treasuries. The more demand there is for US Treasuries, the easier it is for the US to keep running deficits. It's actually brilliant, because you see, this isn't the first time the US has done this. This is actually the third time they are running this playbook. Now, there's an IMF paper from 2024 that actually breaks down what happened. And the numbers are fascinating. So let's go back a few decades. After the Second World War, US debt was about 120% of its GDP. By 1980, it has fallen to just 30%. Did they pay it off? Did they run massive surpluses? Nope. So what did they do? Well, they kept interest rates at 2% while inflation ran at just about 4%. Debt burden melted away over 35 years. Without that first part, without keeping interest rates below inflation, the rate of the debt drop would have been much slower. If you were a regular person with a savings account, you were earning maybe 2% interest while inflation ran at 4%. You were slowly losing purchasing power. Your wealth was quietly transferred to the government over 3 decades. That's how they did it the first time. Now, let's talk about the second time. In 1971, President Nixon went on television and said that the United States will no longer convert dollars to gold. And here's what's important to understand. This wasn't some grand philosophical decision about monetary policy. Basically, the US government was running out of gold. Foreign governments, especially France, were demanding to convert their dollars to gold, and the US couldn't couldn't honor all their claims. It only had about 10 billion in gold reserves backing 80 billion in foreign held dollars. The math didn't math. So President Nixon closed the window. No more gold convertibility. And the result, well, inflation went from about 1% in 1963 to over 13% by 1980. The dollar lost a third of its value, but so did the real value of the debt. The US didn't default. They didn't declare bankruptcy. They paid back every penny they borrowed, only they paid it back in dollars that were worth a lot less than when they first borrowed them. And now we get to 2008. The financial system is basically collapsing, and the Fed's solution is quantitative easing. They printed 3.7 trillion to buy bonds. The stock market recovers, asset prices go up, but regular economic growth stays sluggish for years. People who own stocks and real estate got wealthier. People who relied on savings accounts and wages basically fell behind. And once again, the debt problem was solved, not by paying it back, but by inflating assets and suppressing interest rates, while slowly eroding the real value of the debt over time. It's the same strategy every time. Keep interest rates low, let inflation run higher, you transfer wealth from savers to borrowers, and the biggest borrower is the government. And now we are here in 2025 with $37 trillion in debt. Debt to GDP is back to over 120%, right where we were before World War II. And once again, they need a mechanism to slowly reduce the real burden without explicitly defaulting. Enter stablecoins. And here's how it works in 2025. Say someone in Argentina wants to protect their savings from their collapsing local currency. They purchase stablecoins backed by US dollars. The stablecoin company takes those dollars and buys, short-term US Treasury bonds. This creates demand for US debt, which keeps Treasury yields low. A low yield means that the government can basically keep borrowing cheaply. Meanwhile, inflation is about 3.4%. It's the same playbook. Negative real rates slowly erode debt burden. And here's the brilliant part. The people buying these treasuries have way worse inflation than the USA. If you're in Argentina with 140% inflation, well, holding USDT that only loses 3.4% is a fantastic deal. So, stablecoins let the US export financial repression to people who actually want that repression. They are not victims, so don't call them that. They are willing participants because the alternative is far worse. It's financial repression, but it's rebranded as a service. This is why the Genius Act passed with bipartisan support. This is why Trump met with stablecoin executives. This is why they created the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve, not to pay off debt with Bitcoin, but to legitimize crypto as a mainstream asset class, which creates more demand for stablecoins, which creates more demand for treasuries. It will be a slow reduction in debt over 15, 20, 30 years. And that brings us to what it actually means for you and for me. Well, remember that feeling when, you check your bank account after payday and there's less left, over than there was last year? Well, now you know why. This is the plan and it's already running. Every year, your rent goes up by 5%, your groceries go up by 4%, your car insurance goes up by 6%, your wages struggle to keep up with inflation. It's not dramatic. You don't wake up one day and find out your money is useless. It's just you have less breathing room. A little more month at the end of the money, basically. Retirement gets pushed back a few years. The house that you wanted cost 50,000 more by the time you saved enough. So that 37 trillion crypto reset that was mentioned by the Russian advisor, well, that's not going to happen. However, a 37 trillion slow grind, well, that's already here. If this video made you rethink everything that you knew about national debt and crypto, well, do me a favor, hit the like button and please share this video with someone that you think needs to see it. And if you want more analysis that actually does the math instead of, just repeating headlines, please hit subscribe. Now, I'm curious, after watching this, do you think stablecoins are the dollar's best defense? Let me know in the comments below. I'm reading all of them. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.